The day had arrived, the day I never thought I'd face alone. My husband's funeral. The sky was a dull gray, as if the heavens themselves mourned with me. I stood there, wrapped in black, surrounded by family and friends who wore their grief like a mask. Everyone seemed to move in slow motion, their faces a mixture of sorrow and forced composure. But beneath the surface, I could feel the tension doubt like a storm waiting to break. I looked around at the familiar faces, my children, my siblings, cousins, and distant relatives who had come to pay their respects. They all said the right things, offered the right condolences, but their eyes told a different story. There was something unspoken, a quiet undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite place. It was as if the loss of my husband had stirred up more than just sadness. It had unearthed secrets, resentments, and old wounds that no one dared to mention out loud. As the ceremony drew to a close, I felt a hand slip something into mine. A folded envelope, plain and unassuming. I glanced around, confused. No one else seemed to notice. My heart pounded as I carefully unfolded the letter, the paper crisp and cold against my fingers. The words inside were unexpected, shocking, and they shattered the fragile peace of that day. No one was prepared for what that letter would reveal. It was a message from my late husband, written in secret, exposing truths about our family that I had never imagined. As I read, the world around me seemed to blur. The faces of my relatives, once comforting, now looked like strangers. The unity I had believed in was nothing but a fragile illusion. That letter changed everything. It forced me to question everything I thought I knew about my husband, my children, and the life we had built together. It was the beginning of a journey I never wanted to take. A journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately empowerment. But in that moment, standing alone with the letter in my hand, all I could feel was the weight of loss and the terrifying uncertainty of what was to come. Looking back now, it feels like a lifetime ago, the years I spent building a life with my husband, a life filled with love, sacrifice, and quiet devotion. We met young, full of hope and dreams that seemed as endless as the sky. He was my rock, my partner, the man I trusted with every part of my heart. Together, we dreamed of a family, a home filled with laughter and warmth, a place where our children would grow up safe and loved. For decades, I poured myself into that dream. I was the steady hand behind the scenes, the one who kept the household running, who made sure birthdays were celebrated, holidays were perfect, and every scraped knee was kissed better. I sacrificed my own ambitions, my own desires to support him and our family. I believed that love meant giving everything without asking for anything in return. We raised our children with the same values: respect, kindness, and loyalty. I watched them grow, proud of the people they were becoming. Family dinners, holiday gatherings, Sunday afternoons in the garden. These were the moments I cherished most. I thought we had built something unbreakable, a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. But now, standing here in the shadow of his absence, I realize how fragile that foundation truly was. The dreams we shared, the family I thought I knew. It was all built on a delicate balance, one that could be shattered by a single secret, a single betrayal. I never imagined that the life I had devoted myself to would unravel so quickly, or that the people I loved most could be the ones to tear it apart. There were signs, of course, little cracks I chose to ignore. The whispered arguments behind closed doors, the sudden coldness in a glance, the unexplained absences. I told myself it was just stress, just the pressures of life. But now, with a letter in my hand and the truth laid bare, I see those moments for what they were, warnings I was too afraid to face. The contrast between then and now is stark. The hope and certainty I once felt have been replaced by doubt and fear. The family dinners and laughter seem like distant memories, overshadowed by suspicion and pain. Yet, even in this darkness, a small part of me clings to the belief that there is still a way forward that I can find, strengthen the ruins and rebuild a life that honors both the love I lost and the woman I am becoming. She never imagined that the foundation of her family was about to crumble. But sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what truly matters and to find the courage to fight for it. After the funeral, when the crowd had thinned and the house grew quiet, I finally allowed myself a moment alone. The letter, still folded neatly in my hand, felt heavier than any weight I had ever carried. I retreated to the small study my husband had once used, a place filled with memories of quiet evenings and whispered dreams. Sitting down, I unfolded the paper with trembling fingers, my heart pounding in a way I couldn't explain. The handwriting was unmistakably his dot careful, deliberate, and filled with a gravity that sent chills down my spine. As I began to read, the words hit me like a thunderclap. The letter was not just a farewell. It was a confession, a revelation that shattered the world I thought I knew. He wrote of hidden debts, loans taken out in secret, debts that threatened to swallow everything we had built. But more than that, he spoke of betrayal within the family, a betrayal so deep it had poisoned the very roots of our lives. There were names mentioned, people I had trusted, people I had loved without question. The letter hinted at manipulation, greed, and a conspiracy to take control of what was rightfully mine. I read on, each sentence unraveling the fabric of my reality. My husband had discovered that some family members had been siphoning money, exploiting his trust, and plotting behind his back. He had tried to protect me, to shield me from the pain, but now, with his passing, the truth was laid bare. The letter was his final act of love and warning, a plea for me to be vigilant, to stand strong, and to fight for what was ours. Tears blurred my vision as I struggled to comprehend the depth of the deception. How could those closest to us harbor such secrets? How had I been so blind? The man I had spent a lifetime with had carried this burden alone, and now it was mine to bear. What she uncovered in that letter would change everything she believed about her family. It was a turning point, a moment when trust was broken and the path ahead became uncertain and fraught with danger. But it was also a call to action, a challenge to rise above the betrayal and reclaim her life. As I folded the letter back up, a fierce determination ignited within me. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful, and I would fight to protect the family I still believed in, the family I was determined to save, or at least to understand. That night, as the house settled into silence, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The days after reading the letter were a whirlwind of confusion and heartache. I felt as if I were caught in a storm, tossed between disbelief and the sharp sting of betrayal. Every time I tried to make sense of what I had learned, my mind spiraled into questions I couldn't answer. How could the people I loved most be capable of such deceit? Was my entire life with them a lie? I tried to bring up the letter with my children, hoping for clarity, for some sign that I was wrong, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But instead of comfort, I was met with defensiveness and anger. My eldest son's face hardened when I mentioned the debts. My daughter's eyes flashed with irritation when I questioned the family's finances. It was as if I had become the enemy overnight. "Mom, you're imagining things," my son said sharply one afternoon. "Dad wouldn't have left us in this mess. You're just upset because you're grieving." But I knew better. The letter was real. The pain was real. And the silence that followed their words was even more telling. I reached out to other relatives, hoping to find support, but doors closed quietly in my face. Some avoided me altogether. Others offered hollow condolences but refused to discuss the letter or its implications. The family I had once thought of as a fortress now felt like a maze of shadows. Where trust was a fragile, fading light, loneliness settled over me like a heavy fog. I questioned everything, my judgment, my memories, even my own sanity. Was I truly alone in this? Was there anyone who saw the truth, who understood the betrayal I was facing? Just when the isolation threatened to swallow me whole, a surprising ally stepped forward. It was my late husband's oldest friend, a quiet man who had always been on the sidelines but never far from the truth. He reached out one afternoon, his voice gentle but firm. "I've known about some of this for a while," he said quietly. "I didn't want to get involved, but you deserve to know the whole story. You're not alone." His words were a lifeline, a flicker of hope in the darkness. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a glimmer of strength. Maybe, just maybe, I could face this storm, not as a solitary figure, but with someone who understood the depth of the betrayal and the fight ahead. The road was still uncertain, and the family I thought I knew was fractured beyond repair. But in that moment, I realized that even in the midst of confusion and denial, there was a chance for truth, and for healing, determined not to be swallowed by the shadows of betrayal. I knew I had to dig deeper. The letter was only the beginning, a key that unlocked a door I never wanted to open. But now that I had the courage, I couldn't turn back. Every new discovery was more painful than the last, each one peeling away the carefully constructed facade my family had maintained for years. I started with the finances, the most tangible evidence of the deception. What I found was staggering. Hidden accounts, unexplained withdrawals, and debts that had been quietly accumulating without my knowledge. It was as if someone had been siphoning away the life we had built, piece by piece, while I was left in the dark. The numbers didn't lie, but the faces I confronted did. At family gatherings. The smiles were bright, the laughter easy, but behind closed doors, whispers of favoritism and resentment simmered. I learned that certain relatives had been given preferential treatment, loans forgiven, inheritances promised, while others, including myself, were deliberately excluded. The warmth I had once felt at the dinner table now felt cold and calculated. One evening, I confronted my daughter about the discrepancies. Her eyes flashed with anger, but beneath it, I caught a flicker of guilt. "You don't understand," she said, voice trembling. "It's complicated. We were trying to protect you." Protect me? The irony stung. Protection through deception felt like a cruel joke. I realized then that the family I had trusted was a web of hidden agendas, each thread tangled with lies and half-truths. I reached out to my husband's old friend again, who had become my confidant in this dark journey. Together, we pieced together the fragments of truth, uncovering betrayals that went beyond money, old grudges, secret alliances, and manipulations that had poisoned relationships for years. The contrast between the family's public image and the private reality was staggering. To the outside world, we were a picture-perfect family, bound by love and loyalty. But behind the scenes, the cracks were deep and widening, threatening to swallow everything whole. With every revelation, my heart ached more deeply. The man I had loved had fought a silent battle to protect us all, and now it was my turn to face the storm he had warned me about. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with pain, but I knew I couldn't turn away. This web of lies was tangled and dark, but I was determined to unravel it, no matter the cost. Because only by facing the truth could I hope to reclaim my life, my dignity, and the family I still believed was worth saving. The weight of betrayal had become unbearable. Every conversation, every family gathering, felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong step and everything could explode. I was exhausted, emotionally drained from trying to hold together a family that seemed determined to tear itself apart. The manipulation, the guilt trips, the veiled threats, they all wore me down, piece by piece. But there came a moment, A sharp, clear moment when I realized I could no longer be the victim in this story. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but rather a slow burning fire that grew inside me, fueled by years of sacrifice and now years of betrayal. I had given so much, my time, my love, my trust, and received little in return but pain and disappointment. I was done pretending that silence and compliance would keep the peace. I was done letting others dictate my worth or control my life. That day, I sat alone in the quiet of my home, the letter still folded on the table before me. I thought about all the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, all the moments I had swallowed my hurt to keep the family together. But now I knew that protecting myself was not selfish. It was necessary. I made a decision. I would set boundaries. Clear, firm, and unyielding. No more allowing family members to manipulate me with guilt or threats. No more hiding my pain to avoid conflict. I would speak my truth, demand respect, and protect what was left of my dignity. When I shared my decision with my family, the reaction was immediate and intense. Some were shocked, as if I had become a stranger overnight. Others tried to guilt me, reminding me of my role as the matriarch, the glue holding everyone together. But this time, I stood my ground. My voice was steady, my resolve uncheckable. Enough, I said. I will no longer be silent. I will no longer be used. Her decision would shock her family. And change her life forever. It was a turning point, a moment of empowerment that shifted the balance of power. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of strength and clarity. I was no longer a victim of their games. I was a woman reclaiming her life. Setting boundaries wasn't easy. It meant facing backlash, enduring loneliness, and confronting painful truths. But it was also the beginning of healing. It was the first step toward freedom. And as I took that step, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. The moment I set those boundaries, the calm I had hoped for didn't arrive. Instead, it felt like I had thrown a stone into a hornet's nest. The backlash was swift and brutal. Family members who once smiled politely now turned cold and distant, their words sharp and their eyes filled with accusation. It was as if I had betrayed them when all I had done was finally stand up for myself. Guilt trips came first out subtle at first, then more blatant. After all we've done for you, they said, how can you turn your back on your own family? I heard the familiar refrain of sacrifice twisted into a weapon against me. They reminded me of the years I had devoted to the family, as if that should bind me forever to their demands and manipulations. But I refused to let their words break me. Then came the threats, thinly veiled but unmistakable. If you keep this up, you'll regret it. You don't want to see what happens next. The emotional blackmail was relentless, designed to wear me down, to make me doubt my own strength. They played on my fears, my loneliness, and the deep desire I had to keep the family together, no matter the cost. At times, the pressure felt overwhelming. I questioned myself, wondering if I was being too harsh, too stubborn. Was I really doing the right thing? Would it have been easier to stay silent, to keep the peace? But every time those doubts crept in, I remembered the letter. The truth my husband had entrusted to me, the betrayal I could no longer ignore. Would she crumble under the pressure or stand her ground? That question echoed in my mind as the emotional warfare intensified. I knew the stakes were high. Giving in would mean losing myself all over again. Standing firm meant risking everything. Relationships, support, even my own sense of security. But I chose to stand my ground. I began to set clear limits on what I would tolerate. I stopped answering calls when the tone was accusatory. I refused to attend gatherings where I was made to feel unwelcome or blamed. I sought help from professionals who could guide me through the emotional storm. And slowly, I found my voice growing stronger, my resolve deepening. The family's attempts to control me only highlighted how much power I had reclaimed. Their anger was a reflection of their fear that I was no longer theirs to manipulate. And while the road was painful and lonely at times, I knew that this battle was necessary because true strength isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about facing it head on with courage and conviction. And as the emotional warfare raged around me, I held on to that truth like a lifeline. I would not be broken. I would not be silenced. I would fight for my dignity, my peace, and the life I deserved. In the midst of the storm. When the walls seemed to close in and the weight of betrayal threatened to crush me, I found something I hadn't expected. Strength, not from the family I had once trusted, but from places I never imagined would offer comfort or hope. At first, I felt utterly alone. The people I had counted on were either distant or hostile, and the silence around me was deafening. But one afternoon, a close friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out. She had heard whispers of my struggles and simply said, "I'm here if you need to talk." That simple offer was like a lifeline thrown into a raging sea. I began to open up, sharing my pain and confusion with her. She listened without judgment, offering empathy and encouragement. It was the first time in months that I felt truly heard. From there, I found the courage to seek professional help, a counselor who specialized in family trauma and emotional abuse. Our sessions became a sanctuary, a place where I could unravel the tangled emotions without fear or shame. But the most surprising source of strength came from a community group I discovered online. Women like me, older, strong, and resilient, who had faced their own battles with family betrayal and loss. Their stories mirrored mine in so many ways, and their support was unwavering. Through shared experiences, advice, and encouragement, I realized I was not alone. There was a whole network of women who understood the pain, the confusion, and the fierce determination to reclaim their lives. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places. It wasn't the family I had hoped for, but these new connections became my pillars of support. They reminded me that healing is possible, even when the path seems dark and uncertain. With each conversation, each shared story, I felt my confidence returning. I began to see myself not as a victim, but as a survivor. Someone capable of setting boundaries, demanding respect, and building a new life on her own terms. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Hope that I could heal, hope that I could find peace, and hope that I could create a future defined not by betrayal, but by strength and resilience. And in that hope, I found the courage to keep moving forward. The day of the confrontation arrived like a storm on the horizon, inevitable, charged with tension and impossible to ignore. I had spent weeks gathering my thoughts, steeling myself for what I knew would be one of the hardest moments of my life. The letter, the betrayals, the lies, they all led to this. I was no longer willing to hide behind silence or pretend that everything was fine. It was time to face my family, to demand the honesty and respect I deserved. We gathered in the living room of the family home, the place where so many memories had been made, now heavy with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. The air was thick with anticipation. My children sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact. My siblings exchanged uneasy glances. Even the cousins who had once been close now seemed like strangers. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every eye on me. "I've spent too long in the dark," I began, my voice steady but firm. "It's time for the truth. No more secrets, no more lies." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I could see the flicker of panic in their eyes, the subtle shifts in posture as they braced themselves. But I was ready. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, and now nothing could stop me. No one expected what she said next. I continued, my voice growing stronger. I know about the debts, the hidden accounts, the favoritism. I know about the ways some of you have taken advantage of Dad's trust, Dot, and mine. I'm not here to accuse without proof, but I am here to demand respect. Respect for the woman who has given everything to this family. A murmur rippled through the room. Some faces flushed with anger, others with shame. My eldest son's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. Then the floodgates opened, accusations flew, voices rose, and years of bottled up resentment spilled out. Some tried to justify their actions, blaming circumstances or misunderstandings. Others lashed out, calling me selfish or ungrateful. But beneath the noise, the truth shone through. Pain, regret, and a desperate need for a reconciliation. For the first time, the power dynamic shifted. I was no longer the silent victim, the woman to be controlled or dismissed. I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had faced betrayal and chosen to stand tall. As the confrontation wore on, cracks appeared in the family's facade. Old alliances fractured and new ones formed. Some family members stepped forward, admitting their mistakes and expressing a desire to make amends. Others retreated, unwilling or unable to face the consequences of their actions. By the end of the day, the room was changed. The air was still heavy, but there was a new energy. Of fragile hope that honesty could lead to healing. Left that gathering exhausted but empowered. I had demanded the truth, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my voice. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own story. No one expected what I said next, that I was ready to forgive, but only on my terms. Because true respect, I knew, could never come without boundaries. And I was finally ready to set them. For years, I had lived in the shadows of others' expectations, sacrifices, and betrayals. But that day. The day I stood up to my family and demanded honesty. Marked the beginning of something new. It was the turning point where I stopped being defined by pain and started reclaiming my life. Piece by piece, the first step was setting clear, uncheckable boundaries. No longer would I allow myself to be manipulated or silenced. I told my family what I would accept. And what I would not. It wasn't easy. There were moments of resistance, moments when old habits and fears tried to pull me back into the role of the quiet, compliant woman. But I held firm. I learned to say no without guilt, to protect my time, my emotions, and my peace. With those boundaries in place, I began to rediscover myself. I took up hobbies I had long abandoned, reconnected with friends I had neglected, and allowed myself the freedom to dream again. The weight of years of betrayal and grief slowly lifted, replaced by a quiet strength that surprised even me. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Freedom wasn't just about distance from toxic family dynamics. It was about embracing independence in every sense. I started managing my own finances, making decisions without fear of judgment or interference. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see, savoring the joy of new experiences. Most importantly, I nurtured my own self-worth, learning to love and respect myself as fiercely as I had once loved others. Peace settled over me like a gentle balm. It wasn't the absence of pain. That would be impossible, but a deep acceptance of my past and a hopeful vision for the future. I realized that empowerment wasn't a destination, but a journey, one that required courage, patience, and self-compassion. The transformation wasn't just internal. My relationships began to shift too. Some family members respected my boundaries and made genuine efforts to rebuild trust. Others chose to walk away, and I learned to let go without bitterness. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, who celebrated my strength rather than questioned it. Looking back, I see how far I've come from a woman crushed by betrayal to one who stands tall, proud, and unafraid. The road was long and often painful, but it led me to a place of empowerment I never thought possible. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. And that freedom was the greatest gift of all. After reclaiming my independence and setting firm boundaries, I realized that healing wasn't something I could do alone. The wounds left by betrayal and loss ran deep, and the path to recovery required more than just strength. It needed connection. I began to seek out new relationships, people who understood my journey and could walk alongside me as I rebuilt my life. At first, it was daunting. Trust had been shattered, and the fear of being hurt again lingered like a shadow. Could she ever trust again? The answer surprised her. Slowly, cautiously, I opened my heart to new friendships, women who had faced their own struggles, who shared stories of pain, resilience, and hope. Together, we formed a community built on empathy and understanding, a safe space where no one had to pretend or hide. This new circle became my lifeline. We shared our experiences openly, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes just a listening ear. It was in these moments of vulnerability that I found strength, not just in myself, but in the collective power of shared stories. The isolation that had once felt suffocating began to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging I hadn't known I was missing. Self-care became a priority. I learned to nurture my emotional and physical well-being, embracing practices that soothed my soul. Long walks in nature, quiet mornings with a book, journaling my thoughts and feelings. These small acts of kindness toward myself were revolutionary, a stark contrast to the years I had spent putting everyone else's needs before my own. The healing process was not linear. There were days when the pain resurfaced, when memories threatened to pull me back into despair. But with my new community and self-care rituals, I found the resilience to keep moving forward. I discovered that healing is not about forgetting the past, but about learning to live with it in a way that no longer controls you. Could she ever trust again? Yes, not blindly, but wisely. With boundaries in place and a supportive network around me, I found that trust could be rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, and on my own terms. This new chapter was about more than survival. It was about thriving. It was about creating a life rich with connection, compassion, and hope. And in that, I found a peace that no betrayal could ever take away. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, the family launched their final, desperate attempt to regain control. It was as if they sensed the power slipping through their fingers, the boundaries I had set, the independence I had claimed, and they weren't willing to let go without a fight. This last-ditch effort wasn't subtle. It was calculated, relentless, and designed to break me once and for all. It began with whispered rumors, carefully planted to undermine my reputation among relatives and friends. I heard through the grapevine that I was being painted as selfish, unstable, even ungrateful. The very community I had worked so hard to build was suddenly clouded with doubt. It was a cruel tactic meant to isolate me and make me question my own worth. Then came the legal threats. Family members who once smiled in my face now sent cold letters, demanding access to finances, property, and even threatening to challenge my late husband's will. The courtroom, which I had hoped to avoid, suddenly became a battleground. I was forced to confront not only their greed, but the deep wounds of betrayal all over again. But the most painful attacks were emotional. Phone calls filled with accusations, messages dripping with venom, and attempts to guilt me into submission. They reminded me of the sacrifices I had made, the years I had devoted to the family, as if those memories could be used to chain me back into silence and obedience. At times, the pressure was suffocating. I felt the weight of their expectations, the fear of losing everything I had fought so hard to protect. Would she lose everything, or finally win? That question haunted me in the darkest moments. But this time, I was ready. I leaned on the strength I had built. The support of my new community, the guidance of my counselor, and most importantly, the fierce determination that had carried me this far. I refused to be intimidated or silenced. I stood firm in my truth, armed with evidence, legal advice, and an uncheckable belief in my own worth. The battle was long and exhausting, but with every challenge, I grew stronger. I learned to navigate the legal maze, to speak up for myself without fear, and to protect my peace even when chaos raged around me. The family's attempts to sabotage my progress only highlighted how far I had come from a woman broken by betrayal to one who could face adversity head dash on in the end. The final challenge was not just about winning a legal battle or reclaiming property. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my voice. And when the dust settled, I realized that victory wasn't just possible, it was mine. Would she lose everything, or finally win? Against all odds, I won. Not just the battle, but the freedom to live on my own terms, with strength, grace, and the knowledge that I would never again be anyone's victim. After months of turmoil, confrontation, and relentless struggle, the dust finally began to settle. The legal battles were over, the emotional storms had calmed, and I stood at the edge of a new chapter, one shaped by justice, peace, and hard-earned clarity. Justice was finally served, but at what cost? The court ruled in my favor, affirming my rights and protecting what was rightfully mine. The hidden debts were accounted for, the manipulations exposed, and the family members who had sought to exploit the situation were held accountable. It was a victory not just of law, but of truth. Yet, even as the gavel fell, I knew that justice was more than a legal outcome. It was a personal journey toward healing and self-respect. Emotionally, the road was more complex. Some family members chose reconciliation, reaching out with genuine remorse and a desire to rebuild trust. Others remained distant, unwilling, or unable to face the consequences of their actions. I accepted that not everyone would walk this path with me, and that was okay. True peace came from within, not from the approval of others. I found solace in the new life I had created, one defined by boundaries, honesty, and self-love. The pain of betrayal lingered, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it became a reminder of my strength and resilience. I have faced the darkest parts of my family's secrets and emerged empowered. With a clearer sense of who I was and what I deserved, justice was finally served. But it came with sacrifices, relationships lost, trust broken, and a childhood dream of a perfect family forever changed. Yet in that loss, I found freedom. Freedom to live authentically, to love without fear, and to build a future on my own terms. As I look back, I realized that justice isn't always about punishment or revenge. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your voice, your dignity, and your peace. And in that, I found a victory far greater than any court ruling. The story of my family's betrayal ended not with bitterness, but with hope. A hope that even in the face of pain, healing and justice are possible. And that, perhaps, is the greatest justice of all. Looking back on everything, the love, the betrayal, the battles fought and won, I realized how much I'd learned about trust, boundaries, and self-worth. These lessons didn't come easily. They were carved out of pain and perseverance, shaped by moments of doubt and courage. But they are truths I hold close now, truths I want to share with anyone who might be walking a similar path. Trust is fragile. It's something we give freely to those we love, often without question. But trust must be earned and protected. Blind trust can leave you vulnerable to hurt and deception. I learned that it's okay to question, to seek clarity, and to demand honesty. Trust isn't weakness. It's a gift that deserves respect. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are lines drawn to protect your heart and your peace. Setting boundaries was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was also the most freeing. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. It teaches others how to treat you and shows that your well being matters. Without boundaries, love can become a cage and self-worth. How easy it is to lose sight of it when you're caught in family drama and betrayal. But self-worth is the foundation of everything. It's the quiet voice inside that reminds you that you deserve respect, kindness, and happiness. No one can take that away unless you let them. Reclaiming my self-worth was the key to healing and empowerment. To anyone watching who feels trapped by family struggles, who wonders if they're alone or if things will ever get better, I want you to know this. You are not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your pain is real, but so is your strength. You have the power to set boundaries, to seek support, and to rebuild your life on your own terms. What would you have done in my place? There's no right or wrong answer, only your truth. But I hope my story gives you courage to face your own challenges, to stand up for yourself, and to believe in the possibility of healing and hope. Remember, you are worthy of love and respect. And sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most beautiful victories. Thank you for listening to my story. If anything I've shared today has touched your heart or reminded you of your own experiences, please know you're not alone. So many of us face family struggles, betrayal, and the challenge of reclaiming our lives. And together, we can find strength and healing. I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Your story matters. Share it below and be heard. Whether it's a moment of pain, a breakthrough, or a lesson learned, your voice can inspire and support others who are walking a similar path. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Join our community of strong, courageous women who uplift each other through real stories, honest conversations, and heartfelt support. Together, we create a space where healing begins and empowerment grows. Remember, you are not alone. Your journey is important and your voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing from you.